All right, Vicky, thank you for being here.
I'm very, very excited to see you and to talk through this. And it's been a long year for us, so I'm super excited to do this.
We were just joking about how we're like really good friends. You
Yes.
were one of my bridesmaids at my wedding, and yet it's taken like a work thing or, for us to actually get together in this time.
It's weird, right? But at the same time, we're both so dedicated, I think, to our clients and what's going on in the last year. And especially, from a financial perspective, from a jobs perspective, it's hit us so hard that it's not surprising that we're kind of just resurfacing. Um,
Yes.
and the only thing that we've been kind of focused on is work because it directly impacts people. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit, yeah, how have your clients been during this time? You know, it's been a rough year for a lot of people looking for jobs. Same thing with a lot of my clients, because a lot of my clients are in creative fields in the entertainment industry or as musicians, like all of that was shut down for a very long time. So, what have you seen in the last year with your clients?
It's been really tough.
Mm.
I mean, I remember and I tell people, I have on my calendar circled March 8th, 9th, and 10th in red. And I think it literally didn't hit us, right? We're entering last year, January, February, as okay, well, it's the turn of the year, et cetera, et cetera. And then literally in a matter of days, everything just gets shut down. And I think what's been tough for my team and my clients and the people that I work with is it's been kind of rolling out in a segment of 3 months,
Mm.
right? You get that initial shock of okay, everything's shutting down, but you're not thinking about job loss at the time. It's just okay, things are shutting down, we've got to take care of health, whatever is going to happen. I remember posting on my Facebook or whatever that hey, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, right? two
Mhm.
weeks That's kind of that mentality. Yeah, okay, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
um, and then as March went on and April hit, I think that reality sank in that, hey, this is going to be longer than a month, 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And then people are starting to, they're starting to use up their savings, right? They're starting to burn through savings now. And it was kind of in April and May when I think the first round of furloughs or, hey, we're not reopening anytime soon, started to hit people. And so mentally, you could see like this transition happening around that time frame. And I work a lot with students, so in that April timeframe, a lot of them were starting to figure out, hey, I'm graduating and I'm now graduating without a job, or my job got rescinded, or I got my internship, but we don't know what's going to happen with the internship now, or internship offers are getting pulled. um, so then you just saw this mental decline probably around April, May
Mhm.
timeframe.
Mhm.
And it was still okay, right? It's still doable. Hey, you know, got rescinded, but everybody else's did too. So it's okay. We'll find something. That hope was kind of still there. And then June, July timeframe, you just started to see people get a little bit more exhausted because they weren't finding something.
Yeah.
And, when we fast forward through that, that kind of lingered because I think this whole notion, and why I love talking to you about it, is this notion of jobs and this notion of financial stability
Mhm.
kind of starts to rub on, am I worthy?
Yes. 100%. Mhm.
And that probably defined the last 6 months of last year, where
Mhm.
people were just going, is it, I'm getting rejections left and right. Vicky, I applied 300 times and I got rejected 300 times. What's wrong with me? Um, and that's really when you just started to see people go into pure depression.
Yes. Yeah. It really messes with your mindset for
Mm.
yeah. And of course like as you've acted before too. And so when I see actors, it's like they kind of understand the rejection on that end of
Mhm.
things, but if they're looking for another job to kind of make ends meet, it's like they don't expect that, right? They're not expecting that because they were probably working, some were working like as, servers, and
Yes.
those restaurants would get shut down, and they were not expecting that, and then not expecting like, okay, now I can't find anything
Right.
at this time. Yeah, and it does start to weigh on you to go, okay, is this just hopeless, right?
Right.
What are you seeing now that we are over a year out from things, and a lot of people are getting vaccinations, and stuff looks like it's opening up again? What have you seen recently?
It's like that glimmer of hope. I mean, if you had to describe it in colors, right? Um, Last March and April went from orange to red, to like grays, blacks. I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
really like that. And then around Christmas time, everybody feels like, okay, there's a glimmer of hope. It's a new year, right? Take a deep breath. Okay. And so it came around in January, February. People were like, okay, I got a new hope. But it wasn't until the vaccine hit that I start to describe colors as more yellows, greens, you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of that hope of, okay, there's something happening, things are reopening, there's this possibility now,
And
it's
are you
taken.
seeing more jobs too? Are you seeing a lot more companies wanting to start to open up again, and recruit, and start to hire more?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what industry. So, there's that, I describe it as a lower left quadrant, the group of jobs where it wasn't a absolute necessity, right? That got shut down. Um, and it wasn't something that like home goods that suddenly spiked. Um, those jobs, when I talk to my team across, the US and around the world who are in those industries, um, you see them going, okay, we think we've kind of leveled it a little bit as far as stabilized our workforce that got us through the necessity period. And so maybe in July timeframe, Q3 is when we're going to start to look at bringing people back because we can. We can physically bring people back. We can, start to plan ahead because we have a little bit more assurance that things are going to stabilize. So, a lot of people who are looking in retail industries or consumer packaged goods and things like that, or entertainment, right? The possibility of returning is in that July timeframe. And so I tell my clients, you know what? If you've been getting rejected this whole time, why don't you just take May off? Honestly, because from a job posting perspective, we'll probably post in Q3. Why rush it? We're not going to do it in Q2. We might start to, dig in a little bit in Q2, but July, look towards July. And then the pressure is not so much on you to say, hey, it's me, I can't get a job.
That's really good advice. That was something that even came up recently with a client, and I said, in terms of energy around money, like if you're in the mode of like, I'm so desperate, I'm so desperate, I'm so desperate, right? Then it almost blocks it from
Yes.
actually happening. So instead, I always recommend like, okay, like yes, take a mental break, and
Yes.
then also take a physical break, and then go and do something that puts you into the flow, right? Puts
Yes.
you into a creative flow, into a like where you just lose track of time. Do something where it's fun and it's in the flow, and where you lose track of time, because then
Mhm.
you're actually changing your own energy up, and that is
Absolutely.
actually very attractive to whatever you really want to happen, so.
I mean, with all these interviews now, right? Your first initial phone screen used to be phone, and a lot of it still is. But now that everybody's acclimated to a video kind of scenario, then a lot of times you're dealing with on camera interviews.
Mhm.
And that energy, right, has to shoot past that little pinhole camera. It's got to go all the way 500 feet past it. And
Yes.
so, what we saw in a lot of folks, especially experienced hires, when we talk about that difference of vice presidents getting laid off, owners of their own businesses, right? People who have been accustomed to being independent, like you said, for
Mhm.
so long, having to switch gears when you're 50 years old, right?
Mhm.
That's not something that people had expected to do. And so that affected that population really, really heavily. And you just saw the energy completely drain out of them because there is pressure that a student doesn't necessarily have. They have bills to pay, they have families' mouths to feed.
Mhm.
They had to stand in line for the first time to get food.
Mhm.
Um, so, absolutely, like that mental give yourself a break type of thing,
Mhm.
if they could even do it for 7 days,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
transformation in an interview would be
Yes.
100%.
Yes, absolutely. And this is something that comes up over and over again, right? Because of the pandemic, because yeah, like you said, people have mouths to feed and all of those things, and there's this feeling of like, oh, I haven't had a job in so long,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of competition out there. What do you say about negotiating for a higher rate? Because there are people who are like, well, I don't want to do that because I just want to have this job. I just want to get this job. Right? What is your take?
So I never find somebody successful in an interview scenario when they just want to get the job. It's so unconvincing, right?
Mhm.
The strange thing about human beings is I think people can tell if you're not being authentic.
Mhm.
It's like you can't people go, I can put on a happy face for an interview scenario. I can get through this, right? Just let me
Mhm.
do it face to face.
Mhm.
And I've never seen somebody be able to sell it when they don't believe it, first and foremost.
Mhm.
Um, so oftentimes what I say to people is, okay, let's focus in on this is an opportunity, right? You have an opportunity to pivot. We could explore pivoting, or we could explore going in the same vein. At the end of the day, you're going to get hired because you're the best person for the job.
Mhm.
And my goal is that the person on the other end falls in love with you completely. Because when they do, then one, you're bringing something to the table for them. Two, you're bringing something to the table for yourself because you're mentally convinced of it.
Mhm.
And that's when negotiations can begin, right?
Mhm.
And negotiations these days, it's not necessarily about the salary. People don't stay necessarily because of money. People don't get let go because of money. And when you ask what people want, at the end of the day, the drivers of human behavior, right? A certain component will be, hey, I need this much to live.
Mhm.
And we start with a very, very baseline of let's talk about real practical things. How much do you have to get paid in order to pay your bills?
Mhm.
And where are you at with your kids? Where are you at with your mortgage, right? And this is where you come in really well because without that framework, you cannot even talk about the job situation.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, when you get down to, hey, I got an offer. Whoa, first of all, you got an offer.
Yes. Yes. Celebrate that, right?
First,
Celebrate
celebrate that,
that.
right?
Yes. Yeah. Take a moment to just celebrate that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, like, okay, let's understand, what does the offer have in its components? There's going to be a dollar amount. There's going to be other things like, do you need to get off at certain time to go pick up kids? Do you need to, be able to take care of your parents? Do you need the flexibility to be able to, hey, work remotely so often, right? Those are intangibles that are so huge.
Mhm.
Um, and I've never seen anybody be unwilling to negotiate when they just go, you're my candidate,
Yes, that is
right?
so key. I love that. Yes, that's exactly how I feel about it. Right. It's like, yeah, in terms of negotiations, like if they really want you, they're going to negotiate. Of course, you have to do it in a way. um like I always tell people, like, negotiations should not be a battle, right? It shouldn't be
No,
a, yeah, like you win, I lose, or I win, you lose.
win-win.
It needs to be win-win. It needs to be win-win. It needs to be, let's co-create something together
Yep.
that actually is good for you and it's good for me, right? And
Yes.
then you're also starting the conversation so that they also already start see you as a team member. You're already seeing yourself as a team member. So if you go into a job, it's all going to feel really good. If you just hardball them and you get the
Yes.
highest number possible and, like, basically, bleed somebody dry and they're like annoyed at you, then there's like that weird energy when you start the job.
Yes.
Right? You're going to feel a
Yes.
little bit of pressure, like, oh, I better live up to that amount. And they're going to feel the same thing, like, you better live up to that amount that we just gave you.
Right? It's
Yes.
just it's a formula in a recipe for failure. Um, I mean, if nothing else, people go, how do I know that I'm not being undervalued?
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that is, well, you can look on, salary websites to get an understanding of what the range might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say they do give you an offer that's below what is written on that website. You don't know where that company is in terms of money or finances
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day. And so I don't think people are trying necessarily to undermine or lowball you into a salary.
Mm-hmm.
What they are trying to do is they have a certain amount that they can spend and they need to get something from the hire that they're bringing in. So if they
Yes.
compromise on your abilities, then maybe they'll, go down on the salary a little bit because they're knowingly going, hey, we might need to make up in something.
Yes.
Now, at the end of the
Yes.
day, I always say that the employers have fault too because they write job descriptions that are like um they want everything
They
in there.
want everything, right? Yes.
Right. I say they want Thor, they want Superman, and they want
Wonder
everything,
Woman.
right? Captain
Yeah.
America. They want the whole Avenger gang.
Yes.
Um,
They want the Justice League.
they want both, right? They
Yeah.
don't want the Avengers. They want the Justice League. Yes. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, right, they're not going to get everything in the kitchen sink. So they'll have to make concessions somewhere along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the best negotiation is win-win. You do a great job. You're like, hey, this feels great. And they love you.
Mm-hmm.
So boom, next year, okay, what do
Mm-hmm.
you need to live? And I always say, what do you need to live?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the basis of negotiation is, hey, I need this in order to make this happen.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I actually have them go a little bit beyond that, right? Beyond the what do I need to live? It's like, okay, what do I, yes,
Desire.
yes, like let's take a look at, of
Mm-hmm.
course, like the industry standards,
Yep.
and what the ranges are for those positions, and then really shoot for kind of the high end of that range, essentially.
And
And
it's good. It's good
yeah,
to do that, right?
yeah, yeah. And it's all like, for me with negotiations, it's always about, like, really showing them what you're worth. Like, what do they really want, right?
Right.
What is it that they need and want out of this position so
Mm-hmm.
much, right? Like, okay, once you get started on this job, these are the priorities, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're able to explain to them how you're uniquely qualified to take on those priorities, right? And solve their issue. Because if you can solve their issue, I know that they are going to want to pay you almost whatever you really want. Of course, within reason, right? Within their range. But it's like, if you can solve their problems and they really have the confidence that you can solve their problems, right? Like, then you've got it. You've got it in the bag, essentially.
And isn't it always how it's delivered? I mean, I
100%.
always feel like the delivery part of it, you can make the most astounding request with the most amount of grace and
Mm-hmm.
have them be receptive to it versus somebody going in, well, you know, I read that it really should be this, and I came in as VP of this. And so I really, I really feel like, I mean, there's so many factors in there as far as male female dynamics, gender, race dynamics, um, and take all that away, it could just be where they came from dynamics. You
Mm.
know? If you didn't grow up
Yes.
in the most affluent household, you could be completely appreciative for every single cent, but maybe you're not aiming as high as you could be.
Most that's what I've seen over and over again. It's like if you haven't had the experience of seeing more money, especially when you're trying to ask for more money, it's like then you're almost then you could undersell yourself for
Mhm.
sure, right? And then I've also seen it where, like, I actually helped a client negotiate her. She got a big job at a media company, and
Mhm.
last year during the pandemic, and we were able to negotiate like 30,000 more than what they originally had said was their max.
Mhm.
And it could have stopped much earlier, but because she kind of wanted to stop because she thought she was annoying them.
Mhm.
However, when I was like, looking at the emails and the things that they were sending her, I was like, oh, I don't see that at all. What
Mhm.
I see is that they actually really value you and they're really excited and they don't want to lose you. And they're hoping that this amount was going to suffice. Right. So then we reworked some of their things, realized like she's really like the level that they had her in was actually lower than really her expertise. And so, asked her to go back and tell them like, I think I'm really more at this level and here's why. And
Absolutely.
they did. They moved it up a level, and then she got, yeah, $30,000 more than what she had anticipated. And this was during the pandemic. This was like right smack in the middle of the summer last year, right, in 2020. And so I know that it is possible, and I know it's really your own, like you can block your own
Yes.
advancement, right? You can give all the
Yes.
excuses in the world. You can say, yeah, it's a pandemic, no one's giving out, certain salaries, or it's a
Mhm.
it's this, nobody's hiring, or whatever it is,
Right.
or my age, or like all those factors. I mean, yes, it can be reality for sure. However, we're really mostly limited by our own minds and our own ourselves,
Right.
right?
Right. And it goes back to what you said at the top, which is that desperation channels straight through.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, right, it's in that delivery where by the time somebody extends an offer, you've gone through the rounds. We've already danced the negotiation part, right? We've
Mm-hmm.
already said, hey, I want you to join our team. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to go interview another candidate at this point.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's
That's
make this
probably more
work.
exhausting. Yeah.
Yes, let's make this work, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, partially there's a numbers game there in the pandemic where, yes, certain numbers just completely got cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're the ones that were still hiring, they're still hiring. Um, and if you're still going through the job interview, nothing has changed about that.
Yeah.
The humans on the other side haven't changed their methodology, haven't changed how they feel about somebody, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just because we're in a pandemic. If nothing else, they're like, how can I trust you more? Um,
Mm-hmm.
can you help me more? And if
Mm-hmm.
so, that $30,000 is a drop in the bucket for me because I just lost two.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a good way to think about it too, right? Yeah, like 30,000 isn't even another hire for them. So yeah, paying somebody a little bit more and perhaps negotiating like where where
Yes.
they yeah what their job description is, and that also helps, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Let me go back and ask you this question. You've worked for some huge companies, including Google, right? Like, what helped you or what made you want to start out and start doing stuff on your own?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Um, so kind of backstory of me, I started in finance and accounting
Mm.
as my degree. And so nowhere in my past history should I have ever become a career advisor or started a career, coach. Um, but it kind of goes back to this whole notion of job security equals financial security equals mental security of some sort. There's something in there. Um, when I was working public accounting before, and then I had switched over to doing hiring there at a college level.
Mhm.
So hiring out of universities and colleges for accounting finance students.
Mhm.
And there's a whole systematic interview process when it comes to consulting and financial services and banking and things like that, that goes on.
Mhm.
And it's very organized, it's very systematic, as you would expect finance and accounting and consulting folks to be, right?
Yes.
Um, so it was really interesting. After spending about 8 years, I was with KPMG for 8 years. I went down to a smaller ish tech company at the time called Google. And they had really just, they had started out their engineering hiring, but they really hadn't done much on the business side.
Mm.
So when I went in, I'd like to say that I went from the office to the bouncy ball, next to four other folks on the team who are, recruiting for engineers. They're
Yeah.
like, here's your email. Here's all the emails that have come in for business roles. Go for it, right?
And where the benefits are like, we've got games in the in this other room, right?
It was pretty, night and day change, right? So to anybody who's like, I don't know anything about tech, why would I go into tech? I'm like, well, hey, sometimes you just in life roll the dice. And you go, I have a good feeling about this, and I think I could build this, and actually I know I could build this, right? Um, so going in there, that's when my eyes got open to, let's say, the whole tech world. And the whole tech world was just getting built at that time. So when we first started, Google only had, a couple of US operations. And during that time is when we expanded and built out Europe, built out Asia, built out Latin America. In that expansion process, I hired everything from teachers to the sales folks to business operations to product folks. And it's really interesting how the tech world hires, because they are this organized chaos. They love, that synergy of creativity. So they are never going to be identical to finance and accounting in that way. However, what you find about hiring, whether it is in finance and accounting or tech or entertainment or retail or food, is that each industry has its own way of hiring. Each industry has its own what they're looking for in the type of person. Each geographic location has a real preference in how you talk to me, how you interact with me.
What time you get to work.
Yes, right? And so I thought from that perspective, I found it really interesting. And what I felt really bad for were students coming out or people coming in trying to hit the tech world, trying to, make their way. And you knew they were bright, you knew they probably could do it, but they just didn't have the sense of exactly how this whole thing worked. So this is a very long story to say, well, after I left, my thought was, hey, how do we get this information out to 90% of the rest of the world? You can't tell me that there's 90% out there that aren't smart, aren't able to do everything that I just hired that other 10% to do. What they're lacking is information.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what was beautiful is, I think, if I, as a student, had been given that support at the time, maybe my path would have been slightly different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you think back to when you were coming out of universities, there's always that one or two teachers or professors that help guide your way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought there's got to be a way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of started reaching out to my friends, you, other folks. And the beautiful thing about growing up, right, is that everybody goes their separate paths and does relatively well in their specific industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that the collective mind is way stronger than one. So my team of advisors are people in their functions, in their industries. They could be engineers, they could be product managers, they could be marketing, they could be producers, right? They could be doctors or physicians and optometrists, nurses. They will know their industries so well.
Mm-hmm.
They will know why they're hiring somebody and why they're not hiring somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could cross matrix that and give the right feedback to whoever's producing our hires, universities, wherever they're coming out from, graduate degrees, then I just felt like the mismatch of hiring could start to smooth out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. So helpful. So helpful. Like, I think you're so right. It's like there are lots of really brilliant people. However, they may not know kind of the process or how to do something, right? And so they're going in and all of their beginning interviews are probably just like practice for them.
Right.
And they're not getting it. And whereas like they may be missing out on their dream career, or the companies may be missing out on somebody really fantastic for them, and only because somebody may just not understand it and or not be very good at it, right? Like, who's good at it? I mean, who's really good at doing an interview? I think most people are like, I would rather do something else than be interviewed.
Yes. And if you think about every single person that I know of, how many people have actually stayed in their identical career the duration of their entire lives? It's a very rare feat, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Usually every 3 to 5 years, 7 to 10 years, you reevaluate and you go,
yes,
do I want to stay on this path or do I split off? And
yes.
so this notion that I am interviewing for the thing that's going to be the rest of my life, even if I am near retirement,
Mhm.
is ridiculous.
It's
And
ridiculous, but also in my mind, it's kind of a nightmare.
it is.
Like I am somebody who loves to kind of move around and do different things and change things up. And so if I had to stay at one job for the entire life of my career, I would be like, I would be miserable for sure. But
And
yes, we do know a few people, though. I think we know one or two people, right?
absolutely, right?
Who
And
have stayed, yeah.
yes, and what's beautiful about that is even if you stay within your own field, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at some point you become specialist in that field because you've literally logged the 10,000 hour rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have done it so much that you know it inside and out, which is another beautiful thing. It doesn't mean that you don't choose within that career to do something slightly different. So you're always making those slight adjustments,
Mm-hmm.
and interviewing, even within your own firm, within your own company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's a healthy thing to recognize, because what I usually get as that first meeting with a client is, I've never done this before. I know this really well, but I have no idea what I'm doing on this end. And therefore, I should discount everything I've done for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that whole shot to the ego and shot to the, you know, self-esteem comes in,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
versus really knowing yourself and kind of going, okay, how are we going to just do this pivot now?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go after it now. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're just going to go for it.
Mm-hmm. when it comes to pivoting, right,
Mhm.
careers, or not, maybe not a career change, but maybe just a change within organizations or doing something a little bit different, what have you seen? Like, give me one thing that is like that you've seen actually works, right? Like, what is a successful person who has done that? Like, what do they need?
I I'm thinking of a guy that I recently worked with, and um, he had come from educational books, gone into a software firm, and then, sorry, not a software firm, an oil and gas firm, and then wanted to go to clean energy, right? So he's pivoted several times. Um, and I think at the end of the day, when you're doing a pivot, it's important to cancel out the noise. And so one of the things that we'll first focus on is, okay, let's rule out things that are in and rule things that are out. Just through exploration of what things you've liked in the past, what things you get really drawn to, what do you do in your spare time, right? When we start to laser focus in and can pick, let's say, two or three things to go for,
Mm-hmm.
a couple things happen. The energy and excitement pick up. Like I'm always looking for that spark in people's eyes, right? And then for some weird reason, we want to put all of our time into it. We want to take extra courses. We want to pick up books to read, right? As we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
And it's almost like you can't stop that freight train from going just because they get excited about it. And I think that energy and excitement is contagious, seriously contagious. So they may not have 100% of what the employer is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But man, if they are so excited about it and can talk about it for 30 minutes, you just go, that's my hire. So purely focusing in and lasering in, and being able to, if I were to give you or give, your viewers or listeners like that one tip right now is give yourself 3 columns. Start writing down, hey, this is the column that I naturally they would hire me for because I have X, Y, and Z. And then it's like the second and the third column of what do I really love doing? If I didn't have financial constraints right now, what would I pick up? What book would I pick up? And that I think goes towards what you were saying, which is hitting that aspirational part because now you've written it down. And the other piece that I've heard others say before, and it's very true, is when you start vocalizing it, it becomes reality. And it is freaking scary, right? I remember the first time saying, I'm going to start this business. And the first time somebody wrote an email saying, can you look at my resume? And the first time responding and saying, no problem. Here's how we would go about it. Here's the bill rate. Like that is scary to put a number to it, to say, what are you worth? And so that correlation again between I've said it, I've written it, I've put a dollar amount to it, whether it's my salary expectation or whatever it is, that just starts the freight train going. Yeah. And from there, the resume writing, the LinkedIn writing, all that stuff gives you an end goal. It's just a byproduct of the freight train.
Yeah. And I love that so much because, yes, I think that we all have skills that are transferable to where we want to go. We just may not realize it yet, right? Because the learning the how is actually the least of anyone's concerns, right? Like when I hire team members, I can actually teach the how most of the time, right? I can't teach certain like skills, like talent, like innate abilities or innate things that are about somebody, right, in terms of like hardworking and or ability to get a concept or to ask when they don't understand something, like those kinds of things. I can't, it would be, I can teach it. However, if it's not in you, you're probably not going to do it. I'm going to have to keep saying it over and over again.
Right.
So I do believe, for the longest time, I didn't believe it. I actually thought, gosh, I'm a TV producer. What skills transfer over to other other jobs or other careers, And and so that's why for the longest time I couldn't figure it out. I thought, well, maybe I can be an events planner because
Right.
that's
Right.
similar. However, that was sort of thinking too small, right? Instead, it was like, okay, let's look at the innate skills I have, the things that I'm really good at, and that passion, right? That
Yes.
passion is so important. Like, I love that you said that, because that translates over and over again to every single thing. Like,
Yep.
if I have somebody who working for me that's like passionate and it gets excited about the things that I'm doing and talking about,
Right.
I'm like, yes, that's a person I want. I'll train you. I'll do anything to like have you on my team, because you already translate that excitement and passion that I would want to see, and that's, yeah, that's absolutely the best thing. I really believe that,
There
so.
is nothing right that you could do day in, day out, day in, day out, get up, get dressed, go to your desk. Right? There's no way in the world that anybody could do that if there wasn't some passion or some excitement about what's possible that
Yeah.
day. Um,
Yeah.
so
And if you're not passionate about it anymore, right? Like, if you hate your job, I just want to encourage you to get out of it. Even if you need the money, it's better to get out of it now and then try to look for something later than it is to just keep on staying in a soul sucking job, or a job that you just hate, right? Like a job that, every single day you just feel miserable going into. I worked with somebody a really, really long time ago when I was still in news, and she worked like a very early morning shift, and she did like the morning news shift, and she had to get up at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and get to work by like 2 or 3 in the morning. And she told me one time that she was so depressed, and she hated her job so much, and she was so depressed that she actually wished that somebody would mug her on the way to work just so she didn't have to show up.
oh, that's
Yeah.
I don't even have words for
Yeah.
that.
I was like, you gotta quit. You gotta go do something else, because this is sucking the life out of you, right? Like, you can't sustain this for the long run. Like, she was young. I mean, we were both in our early 20s when we had worked at that job. But imagine if she kept going 10 years, 20 years, I'm sure her health would have suffered. Lots of things would have suffered in her life if she had kept going. Luckily, she did leave, like, probably a year after that conversation. Still a little late in my opinion, but I really believe that, if you don't like something, if you have some money saved up or anything, right? Like, get out, do something different, find something else, and then on the other hand, yeah, if your passion can carry you through so much other stuff, and get you into doors that you may not have thought possible beforehand.
Well, and that's, you hit upon the key, right? Going back to the financial situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to make that move, the savings component to get you out is so key.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you don't have that savings amount, then, I mean, from my perspective, it's take that baby step.
Mm-hmm.
You're not being asked by anybody except for yourself to suddenly make a decision about your grand plan for the rest of your life.
Yes.
It's really not that like dire
Yeah.
in the sense of nobody has a grand plan for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's just a small step to say, okay, this month, yeah, you start saving so that you can get out, or this month okay, I'm going to start to write those 3 columns down.
Mhm.
And then from there, I'm going to look at job postings.
Mhm.
What's required on that job posting? What am I missing?
Mhm.
Okay, I go take that class, right? While you're in this miserable job or whatnot.
Mhm.
2 things will possibly happen. One is, yeah, you might get out, or you might actually find some happiness within yourself and realize, the misery isn't necessarily coming from the job. Maybe it's a fulfillment internally. Um, but either way, it's a very practical move. And I think, what I love about what you do, Katie, and I love what our team does as advisors, is it comes to that from a very practical standpoint.
Mhm.
So I don't pretend to be a life coach. I don't pretend to know psychiatric anything about anything, right? Um, but it's that just small practical steps.
Mhm.
And, if I'm putting it 100% out there, like this last year, it's been mentally draining for anybody who's been a therapist or a coach to say, hey, I'm going to dial on today and I'm going to be in a mentally ready state for you. Because in my own mental mind, I'm exhausted and I am, you know, I say to you right before this interview, I was hauling bed sheets to the laundromat because my 4-year-old peed in them. So,
Yes.
hey,
Yes.
welcome to life.
Yeah.
Um,
It's such a pleasure always to see you and talk to you, but it was, really great to be able to dive into what you do and then also some really awesome tips for people.
I appreciate that. So thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Vicky.
All right. I'll see you again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.